So we're on the last section. We're dealing with slopes and perpendicular lines. In a coordinate plane, two non-vertical lines are perpendicular if and only if their product of their slopes equals -1. So what you need to know is this. When you multiply slopes of perpendicular lines, you get -1 as the answer. So when you multiply slopes of perpendicular lines, -1 is what they equal. Okay, so if the slope of this line right here was down 2 and over 1, 2, 3, 4, so down 2, -2 over 4, that equals -1/2, right?
Yes.
And the slope of this one is rise 2 over 1. So rise 2 over 1, which gives you a +2. If I take 2 and I multiply it by -1.5, I'm going to get the answer -1. So the product of their slopes of perpendicular lines is always going to equal -1. Okay, and vertical and horizontal lines are always perpendicular. You're not going to be able to multiply them to get -1. So that's the only other one that's different. Perpendicular means they create a 90-degree angle. And vertical and horizontal lines are always perpendicular with each other. But anything else that it gives you a slope, when you multiply them together, they give you -1. They're perpendicular. Remember, if they're parallel, they have the same slope. I'm going to write something else. Also, you need to know lines that are perpendicular. Okay, their slope are opposite reciprocals of each other. Now, opposite means a different sign. Reciprocal means the fraction flips. Okay, so 2 is really 2 over 1, right? Well, the opposite reciprocal of 2 over 1 is 1 over 2, and change the sign to be a negative. So these 2 and -1/2 are opposite reciprocals. When you multiply them together, they're always going to give you -1. That's the concept you've got to learn. Perpendicular lines are always opposite reciprocals of the slope. When you multiply them together, they give you -1. So let's look at a couple examples. I want to decide whether the line J1 and the line J2 are perpendicular. So the first thing you want to do is find the slope. So the slope of J1's here, and you can look at 2 points. I went down 2 and to the right 4. Well, that's kind of like what we just did, right? Down 2 to the right 4, and it gives you -1/2. All right, now we're looking at J2. All right, look at J2, and we're going up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and over 1, 2, 3. So up 6 over 3. What's 6 divided by 3? 2. If you couldn't tell that they're opposite reciprocals, you can always multiply them. -1 times 2, or excuse me, -1/2 times 2 does give you -1, so they are perpendicular. J1 is perpendicular to J2. Upside down T is a symbol for perpendicular. But okay, so we're going to determine whether the lines are perpendicular, and in order to do that, you've got to get it in slope-intercept form. Remember, that is y equals mx plus b, right? N's your slope, and that's what determines if the lines are perpendicular. So I take the line 3x minus 2y equals 1, and I move the 3x to the other side by subtracting by 3x. So it leaves me with negative 2y equals negative 3x plus that 1. And then I have to divide everything by negative 2. And I get a negative divided by a negative makes a positive. And a positive divided by a negative is a negative. Okay, and the reason that I divided every component on the right-hand side by negative 2 is because I wanted to see the slope. Okay, you could have divided the whole side by negative 2, but I broke it apart so that I could find the slope. What is the slope of this equation? The slope equals positive 3 over 2. It's a number in front of the x. Okay, the next one is 6x plus 9y equals 3. I subtract the 6x from both sides. The 3 and the 6x are not like terms, so you keep them separate. You're left with positive 9y equals negative 6x plus 3. But then I want to divide everything by 9 to get y by itself. All right, now I broke it apart. Negative 6 divided by 9 gives me a negative 2 over 3x. And a positive 3 divided by 9 gives you a positive 1 over 3. Broke it apart. And the slope is the number in front of the x, which is negative 2/3. All right, now let's look at the slopes. I'll give you a second to write that down. So do me a quick favor. Let's look at the slopes. One is 3 over 2, and the other one is negative 2 over 3. Are the fractions flipped? The numerator, the denominator is flipped around. Yes, it's one positive and one negative. Okay, so they are opposite reciprocals, so they are perpendicular. And if to check yourself if you weren't sure, 3/2 times negative 2/3, you get a negative 6 over a positive 6, which gives you a negative 1. The slope of those two multiplied together is negative 1. So the lines S and T are perpendicular. But you didn't have to multiply it if you noticed that they are opposite reciprocals. Okay, you're more than welcome to do that. But opposite reciprocals are key in recognizing which lines are perpendicular. And you only care about the slope. All right, so we're going to find the slopes of the lines and then decide whether they're perpendicular. Now remember, you can find the slope by doing rise over run. So the slope of, let's call this line A, and this one over here, line B. So the slope of line A, we went down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So down 5 and over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Over 5. So that gives me negative 1. And this one over here, I went rise 1, 2, 3, 4. Over run 1, 2, 3, 4. What's 4 divided by 4? 1, right? Are those opposite reciprocals? Well, they're not fractions, but anytime you have a whole number, you can put it over 1, right? And if you flip 1 over 1, you still get 1 over 1, and one's positive and one's negative, right? They are opposite reciprocals. Test yourself out. Negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. Check. It is perpendicular. All right, and again, you can use the upside down T to represent perpendicular anytime. Is that good? Questions? All right, if you're given the line K, all right, you have to get it into the form y equals mx plus b. If you don't, you cannot tell what the slope is. So you first move your x's to the other side. Bring down your positive 2y equals, you always write the x first, plus the number. And it's a positive 8, that's why I need to add. Then we get y by itself by dividing by 2. And I get y equals negative 3x plus 4. So the slope of K1 is negative 3. Very good. And then we've just got to figure out the other one. Well, this one is already written for you, right? So what's the slope of K2? Negative 3. Are these opposite reciprocals? No. Okay. If you multiply those together, you get positive 9, right? So these are not perpendicular.